Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back. If you missed last time where we were using the watercolor pencils, I'm going to leave a link to that video in the description. But today we are playing around with our watercolor brush and adding water to the pigment that's already on the paper here. This is hot press watercolor paper, so it's a little bit easier to push the pigment around on it. It doesn't stick as much to the texture that you would normally have from a cold press. And what you see me doing here is I am using a large round brush. This is a watercolor brush, so it's excellent at actually holding water in its bristles. And that's all I'm doing. This is just regular water. Every time I'm pulling my brush away from the paper, what I'm doing is I am wiping it on a clean paper towel. So as much as I am mixing the pigments on the paper where I'm actually, putting the brush with the water, I don't want to drag that color all over the page because that's how it's going to get really muddy. So every time I pull my brush away from the paper, we're actually wiping it off on a clean paper towel just to get the color out of the brush and then re-dipping it in fresh, clean water. Now, something else that you're going to notice that I am doing here is I am working in sections. This is a lot like my last painting with a big acrylic one where I recommended working in sections while others dry. We're doing the same thing here, except each section is going to dry a lot faster because this is watercolor, and I am not using a lot of water. We are not soaking the page. I am just dipping my brush in the water, and I'm actually wiping it a couple times on that clean paper towel just to get some of the excess on, and then I'm applying it to the paper. Once the color is actually on the page, you don't need a lot of water to move it around and to activate it. So what we're also doing with the bouncing around is letting those sections dry, and that's how you can define each section, because you'll notice as I'm adding the water, we're blending those colors together, and that's where you can see that there's either the stronger blue or red. We're creating that really dark purple up there in the trees right now. It's actually a little bit darker than I want because those are further away. So again, wiping my brush off each time, I can just go back in with more water, wipe the pigment off, come back in and take more pigment off the paper if I want. It is that simple. This is such a fun process. But that's how you get the hard lines, is as you see me pushing the pigment around on the page. I'm doing a section, I'm letting it dry as I kind of push the pigment with the brush towards the edges, anywhere I want a really defining line. And then I'm wiping away the excess with a clean brush if I want to kind of fade that out and have something really soft. And then I'm letting that dry so that when I come back and I do another section near it, I can again create a hard line and I'm not ruining what I've already done. The nice thing with these watercolor pencils is that even though they are activated with water, I find that unlike regular watercolor that you can kind of reactivate and end up ruining, with the watercolor pencils you really only get one activation. So you have to very deliberately choose where to put your brush with the water and where you want to push that pigment around, because once it dries, even if I come back with water, I find that it's really hard to pick that pigment up or to make it move. Once it dries, it pretty well stays put, which is excellent for not ruining your details, but might be frustrating if you're like, oh shoot, I didn't want it there. That's totally okay. We work with accidents here and we just make them good, but don't get frustrated with that. If you scrub too hard, you're going to ruin your paper and we don't want that. So nice and gentle strokes, nothing is super harsh here, and I'm not pressing hard. I'm actually using a very, very light hand, and that's the same way I'm holding my brush. Your hand shouldn't be tense or gripping that paintbrush too tightly. These are very soft, light strokes. This is a very flowy, easy time. It's a great way to take out some stress and get in a very calm, meditative state. That's what I really love using these pencils and the watercolor brush for, is to just relax and kind of go with the flow, just like you would with water, right? So that's what I really enjoy about this, and I hope you guys do too. This is so much fun. And as far as shapes go, same thing as when I was laying the pigment down on the page. You can see that I'm defining a little bit more where the trees actually are and where I want the tops to go, especially in the middle here with the round fluffy trees. And I'm still keeping it really vague and nice and open. This isn't, I'm not trying to define all of the trees, and I personally think it looks better. This is where, kind of for the more abstract, it's something you just have to do over and over again, and you start to train your eye. There really is no trick to it other than to give it a try. When you try to put in too many details and you're like, no, I have to put in every leaf, otherwise it's not gonna look correct, and oh shoot, that doesn't look like a tree. Breathe out, let go of all of that stress. It doesn't have to be that serious, and it's gonna look a lot better if you relax. Things like this, when they're far away, look better if you can keep them a little more abstract. That's the wonderful thing about the eye and the human mind, is that we'll fill in the details. If you give the overall shape of something, then your mind's gonna fill in the details and it sees the picture that's happening. Everybody might interpret it a little bit different, but that's the beauty of art, right? We want somebody to look at it and have kind of an emotional response, and for that to be unique to that person. I think that's really exciting. So don't get stressed and don't try to put in every little detail, because that's where you're gonna get hung up. And I find that the ones that don't turn out quite the way I want, maybe don't turn out quite the way you want, are the ones that are very in between styles, when maybe it was a little abstract, but then you tried to push it more towards realism, but it wasn't quite hyper realistic, and you're like, shoot, there's something wrong, and it's because you got caught in between styles. So if you're going for this abstract, far away approach, just ease into it and let it happen. Not a big deal. It should be very flowy. And as we finish up with the water here, in between these two steps, I want you to know, I made sure to let the entire thing dry. You do not want your paper wet at all when you're going in with a fine line marker or a pen, whatever it is that you're going to put over top of it, because again, that goes back to, you can end up scratching your paper and you'll end up ruining it, which would be really sad after we put all of this time and effort into it. So don't let that happen. Have a little extra patience, let it dry, and then come in with the marker here like I'm doing. I'm just doing very scratchy lines, and just like I've been saying, we are keeping it loose and very free-flowing. I'm just defining the trees, trying to give myself a little more definition of a couple of individual trees, but I'm not trying to put in every leaf or every tree. I'm just giving the idea of a more solidified kind of vision of what I'm going for here. And this is a sepia brown, which I really love. I have these markers in gray and black that I've used for other paintings, but the black always seems really harsh, and I'm never quite happy with the gray. They do have their applications, but this sepia brown is definitely my favorite. Now, as I'm going in here, and this is part of the process where, like I've said before, I really try to let my paintings speak to me and let me know throughout the process, what do they want to be? Where do those trees want to grow? They don't always grow where I want them to, which, rather than being frustrated with that, I just go along with it. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's where you want to live. That's where I'm going to let you live. No big deal. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking a closer look after everything's dried, and I'm looking at the lines that I've created from the watercolor with the paintbrush. As I was moving that paint around, not only did I create those hard-edged lines where I can easily see kind of the definition of the trees that I knew I wanted, I'm looking even closer at the little splotches, at the little differentiations of color, kind of like you do when you look at a landscape from far away. You don't always see them individualized a lot, but you can see the differentiations in color and shadows, and that's what shows you that there's a bunch of trees there, not just one big tree. And that's what I'm going in and I'm trying to define with this and give the eye a little bit more of a cue of what I'm going for. Same thing as when I was using the paintbrush. We are not doing anything harsh here. Your hand should not be firm. You shouldn't be holding that pencil or that marker too tightly. You shouldn't be cramping up with this. Very loose strokes. You should be holding it loosely. This should be very easy on you. There should be nothing very physically taxing about what we're doing now, which is a big thing for me. If you've watched some of my past stuff, I have some joint issues that I run into, so I try to make sure that I'm always holding my painting supplies correctly, because when you cramp up it can hurt, and then that just takes away the rest of my painting day, and that always makes me a little bit sad. So that's why I like these, as we go into it and just relax, and it shouldn't be hard on you. With these fluffy trees, I'm not doing anything super special with these strokes. All I'm doing are very small, like little kind of circular lines, very gently. It's almost like I'm coloring more than I'm drawing, like when I was putting in some of the later pigment, the green and the blue on the paper, where I wasn't trying to draw any hard lines. I'm just very loosely adding them in, almost like fluffy clouds, which, even though these are trees, the concept is kind of the same. You have very loose, nice, big shapes, and again, I'm bringing them in a little bit where I can see that the colors have defined a little as I added the water, and that's letting me know, like, oh, okay, I got one big tree here, I've got a bunch of little trees. Nice, easy, kind of sketchy strokes. These aren't any really hard lines. We're not doing bold strokes on this one almost at all. These are all very small sketching strokes. Nice and easy. Back to the sketchy trees, where I'm doing more of just up and down strokes. And don't forget, with these guys, they're not just one big tree. I tend to have an issue with that. I think pine trees, and I'm like, oh, you know, like a triangle. But if you look at them, you'll see that even pine trees are broken up into little sections. And so you can kind of have the fluffy part at the top of the tree, and then another little section. You don't have to draw in just one side. You can bounce back and forth. And again, the trick to this is just to do it. Practice it over and over again, and you will get a personal feel for how you want it to look and how you want those abstract kind of lines to fall into place. I've looked around, I've looked at classes, and there's no special trick other than to eyeball it and see what you like. That's part of developing your style, which is always fun and super exciting, I think. So definitely just go for it. It doesn't have to be perfect. There is absolutely no pressure here. And even if you're not doing art to sell it, I personally advocate doing art just for fun. This is so fun to sit and sketch, and it gives your mind time to wander. Maybe you put on some really relaxing, awesome music. Maybe it's not relaxing music. Maybe you really like to get pumped up and just sit there and crank it out. Hobbies need to come back to being about fun and getting out of your head and not worrying so much about the day-to-day. We get locked into our busy, rushing lives, and that's not healthy. You can't stay in that mental state. You are going to burn out. Oh, believe me, I know, I've done it. It's no fun. So whatever your relaxation techniques are, whatever your hobbies are, however you have fun, just go for it. It's so worth it. And whatever you're up to, I hope that you'll kind of share that with me down in the comments. I always wonder how you guys are doing. If you're up to anything creative, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. Even if it's not art, maybe you're into sculpture or some sort of other kind of crafty, creative pursuit. Just make sure that you get that section of your mind going. I think so many tasks throughout the day really rely on the analytical mind, and we're prioritizing and thinking and running through everything that needs to get done. Well, you know what? This doesn't need to get done, but it's so good for you. So I'm going to say it kind of needs to get done. Not in a stressful way, just in a give yourself time. Be kind to yourself, be loving to yourself, and I hope that you have enjoyed doing this. I hope you got around to getting a little crafty something of your own that you can look at the end of the day and just know that, hey, I created this from my own mind. Look at what I did. It's such a good feeling. As always, thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you guys next time. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay creative. Bye.